Welcome to Not Suitable for Work. I'm your host, Peter C. Diamond. You think your office is nuts? Wait until you hear some of these stories.
It's a story I tell people as a cautionary tale of what not to do in a pressure-filled situation.
And there's nothing like making a joke and looking at a room full of people who, are just stone-faced, and they know that you blew it.
What about our professional dynamic has given you a license to act in this way?
Here's your colleague that you've worked with for all these years, and do you know anything about him? Anything about him at all?
With each podcast, I interview folks who have a humorous work story to share. Along the way, I'll offer advice to help you make sense of your own office nonsense. Don't worry, no careers were harmed in making Not Suitable for Work. Names and places may have been changed to protect the not so innocent. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. If you want a promotion, speak up and ask for it. You have to advocate for yourself. If you don't, nobody will. That's how you get ahead in the business world. Never waste a chance to move up the ladder. This is the type of advice you'd get from a mentor, parent, business book, or overly assertive friend. Feeling as though he was being overlooked, my guest, Dan Richardson, took the bull by the horns and seized an opportunity to ask for a promotion. What the people behind all this advice neglect to tell you is the toll that it takes on you mentally and physically.
Working on one of the agency's sort of marquee accounts, it's kind of one of those things that family or colleagues would be like, oh, that's a really good, it's the kind of thing where you're like, I have in my head that like, this is the stuff that makes a career, right? And you're,
and it's because it's probably like well-known brands, like things
sure.
that people know.
Yes.
So, also having spent many years in advertising, when you can talk about things that you work on and other people know there's some cachet involved with that.
It is absolutely not different work. It's just when someone says what you work on, they're like, there's an immediate like, oh, like I buy that, and there's a recognition, so you feel like what you're doing is more important. And so one of the things I'm not, I can be sort of a loudmouth and I can kind of throw my weight around in other things, but one of the things I'm habitually not good at is self-promotion and advocating for myself. So I had previously been at an agency where I kind of languished in a role for about 3 years, and when I did ask for a promotion, they were like, no. And then it took me another year to be like, maybe I should not work at this agency anymore. It wasn't entirely clicking. So working on this account, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm getting really good experience. My boss quits. Okay. I've never been on any kind of like rising star list or 30 under that right. I'm like 30 under 40 under 40 maybe 50 under 50 keep going. Never on one of those lists unless it's some sort of potential like HR problem list maybe that I've never seen. And so my boss quits. I've also been watching a lot of House of Cards at this time, so I'm feeling very, it's bringing out a dark side in me. I'm feeling very Machiavellian about, office politics, and is there some sort of game being played that I could potentially manipulate. My boss quits, and I think, this is my moment. And it was like, I've got to take advantage of this. And I had a pretty good relationship with the woman who's running our, sort of the managing director over, overseeing the entire relationship with for this account, and was feeling very, very bullish on my own prospects. So I was like, I want you promote me into that role. I hadn't been in my current role all that long, so it felt like I was maybe it was a little bit of a stretch, and just to make sure that everyone knew that I was being like evil about it, I made sure to also add in that like if you don't promote me, you'll be looking for, I was like a supervisor, you'll be looking for a supervisor and an associate director at the same time, like scary. And
so you staked your claim.
Yeah, and Yes, and somehow it worked. I think about like myself in that situation. I would have been like, okay, bye. Leave. You can't work here. So I get the role, perfect. Oh, left out one detail is that also the person under me had recently quit prior to that. So what had been sort of like a functional team of 2 was now like me leading a team of 0. But I had the title, right? Oh, and I got a promotion, so good for me. And I'm feeling my most, my most Claire and Frank Underwood that I've done it. I've maneuvered the chess pieces. I've gotten to this piece, and it's also upfront planning time. So there's just a lot of work that goes into planning. Especially for like a CPG brand, like what is their television investment and what networks and what day part, all of those, the fun, nerdy math parts of media.
And have you done anything like this on this scale before?
Yes, but not being like the person from the agency who's like getting the client to be like, yes, let's do that. Usually the person like making the pretty flow charts and doing the math and putting the numbers onto the PowerPoint slides. And then, in the room taking notes while the client is giving feedback, but never like the person
selling it in.
Oh, right. So that requires, thankfully their headquarters is regional. It was a day trip. So the nice thing about it is that I could go there. The bad part about it is that it was like just a long enough drive that you were like, okay, I'll drive up there. Like, is annoying. And so I was going up there frequently because there's just a lot of different steps of checking in. Like, how much do you want to spend? And, do you want to be a part of big events, the Oscars, those kinds of things? Those are all separate discussions that just felt like, you've got a new person kind of as the face of the agency for certain brands. Like, I just needed to make more FaceTime and build a relationship. And it thankfully was going really well. I'm also like working around the clock. Like I was submitting timesheets that were really like I should frame them because it was like, how is it even possible you work that many hours? Because it was like just far enough that like if you had a full day of meetings of like driving up there early in the morning, full day of meetings, and then driving back, like I just didn't like the idea of driving alone and at night. That like it makes me sound maybe like an old like my grandma that's like, I'm not going to drive at night. But I just like got nervous about that like what if I could fall asleep at the wheel or something.
And at this point, are you still kind of a one-man band? Are you
yeah.
So you're still doing this on your own?
Totally.
And the woman who kind of promoted you, is she in the picture, or is she just kind of like, Dan, this is, you asked for it, you got it? And
yeah, and maybe this goes like too into the like the setup of things, but I feel like every portfolio organization has their like their star brands that it, like, within P&G, everyone cares, Procter & Gamble, everyone Tide, right? It's like,
sure,
that's the marquee. And then you've got somebody, I don't even know
the cats and dogs, as we used to say.
Yes, like the ones that it's like, oh yeah, that brand. I didn't necessarily work on the like, oh, that brand, but it was sort of like they were sort of highly profitable, but not terribly intensive. Like nobody was expecting big innovation or too much out of those brands.
She's kind of leaving you. So you're,
yeah,
she's
I'm getting a lot of
you're
like
kind of doing
free
this
reign,
on your own,
which is also giving me a nice feedback loop for my more like, Machiavellian side. And so I'm essentially just getting drunk with power because I'm basically running a fairly large group of brands by myself, and that kind of like. I think that this happens to a lot of advertising people where we get like weirdly addicted to the chaos of things that like that we wear like I worked 80 hours this week or something as like look at how important I am and how I'm like killing myself to I don't know sell trinkets and trash. So the I'm fully immersed in how important I am feeling about myself, and I'm having to stay up. It's a fairly small town in the Midwest. I'm not going to say who it is. Keep everyone guessing. And there's only a limited number of hotels, namely 2 that everyone in the agency stayed at, and they're across the street from each other. And everyone kind of stayed at this one hotel because it was affiliated with a larger chain, so you'd get
your points.
You'd get some sort of points
Sure.
or something, right? What do they, what am I going to use them for? And kind of stayed there. There were some, it wasn't a great hotel. You just kind of closed your eyes and pretended that it was, and you're never really staying there for more than a night anyway, so who cares? And so I'm staying there a lot. I'm racking up a lot of points, and I start to notice that I'm I'm for sure not sleeping a whole lot. I'm not going to the gym a lot or exercising. I'm definitely not dating, which is important. And I start to notice that I'm getting kind of itchy, and I'm
so you're tired, which could all these things just could be symptoms of just stress of working because you're doing it all.
Seasonal allergies, who knows? Could be a lot of different things. And I'm starting to notice that I'm getting kind of itchy, and this goes on for a month before I'm at work and I go to use the bathroom, and I notice something moving on my skin. In a not suitable for work place
in a private area.
Yes, in a private area, and I'm I honestly kind of thought that maybe I was having a sleep deprivation hallucination that
sure.
My skin's moving now, and I'm great, now I have to see a doctor. So after you have an experience like that, you of course wait 1 to 2 weeks before calling a doctor or doing anything.
So there was no immediate paranoia that set in. So for me, I think I would have had there would have been an immediate kind of paranoia of what's going on, but somehow you're still pushing through to.
Yeah, you do what the I think I did what a lot of men do, which is just let's just see if that goes away on its own. And then once it becomes an actual problem, we'll notice. So then when I noticed that my skin was continuing to move, and then I was real itchy, and then actually investigated the problem, I immediately was is this crabs? Do I have pubic lice? And I'm Googling, and it was pretty clear based on the Dr. Google's results that the Google searches came back positive for that. So then I get to do all of the fun.
But at that point, what are you? Are you pissed? Are you angry? Are you just freaked out? Is it what's?
I'm fully grossed out because I have a parasite living on me, but also definitely a feeling of well, I've got so much to do. This could not have happened at a worse time.
Because you're a driven,
right,
advertising media
take a
executive.
note or take a number, pubic lice. Not now. I'm busy. And so I see a doctor, get treatment. For all those listening, it's cleared up. Just don't want anyone to think that I've let it go. I hope to date at some point. And so I have a good relationship, but I'm also kind of a hothead, I guess, or can be. I've been told in performance reviews, and went into my boss's office and kind of slammed the door, and I was I'm working an insane number of hours a week. I don't have time to have sex, but somehow I'm contracting STDs from the hotel that we're staying at. And she starts laughing hysterically, where I was feeling sort of hurt. by it, and I was like, how is this something you can laugh at? And she's like, I don't know where we're gonna stay, because the other hotel that was across the street, she's like, I got bed bugs. Like, we just had to, just had to deal with getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff and dealing with bed bugs. So now there's a corporate thing, and I guess then to add,
so now you guys have really bonded.
We've bonded over
some very
my highly treatable STD
and her bed bugs.
Yes.
I mean, that's like
I feel like cousins to each other. In the parasite family.
Definitely.
Our administrative assistant, who is sort of a character in her own right, is immediately on the phone then with the like corporate offices of this hotel chain, telling them like, and she was very loud on the phone, and we're all like open office, so she's like, we can't have people staying in this hotel anymore, they're contracting venereal disease. And I'm just like sitting there covering my face, trying to sink further and further into the carpet. Like, I don't know who's
that?
Oh boy, who was that? But also I'm a giant loudmouth, so everyone in the office knew, within what? Could I keep it a secret for 2 weeks? Was it 2 weeks? Probably 2 weeks before everyone knew that it was me. And it did become also a bonding experience then with my other interagency partners, who all were able to share their horror stories, including like a wet bed that someone got from that same hotel chain. So it was a nice sort of commiserating.
So it just kind of like opened up Pandora's box of scary hotel stories.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, I feel like what that experience taught me, I guess, was that like, I always feel like there's this great quote that I always screw up, and I meant to write down before I came here. I totally came not prepared with the one thing that I was going to say. Was that there's this great quote that's like, it's a guy, his name is Parker Palmer, and I think he's like I don't think of myself as terribly religious, but I think he's like a religious writer, and was talking about that we are whiplashed between like a crazy like overestimation of our ability and a servile underestimation of our abilities. That basically like we go back and forth between thinking like I'm the king of the world and like I'm absolute garbage, and that like probably neither of those things are true, that it's somewhere in the middle. And I always kind of think that there are sort of experiences that tend to knock me out of the extremes of whenever I experience them. And I think of this contraction, the immaculate contraction of of crabs, as sort of one of those experiences that was like, oh, all right, check yourself. Like you're not keeping the world spinning here. You work in an advertising agency.
So what would you have done? What would you have done differently, do you think? I mean,
yeah, I mean that's such a good question, because it's like, I mean, listening to a lot of your podcast, I think there's sometimes that it's like of just the inexperience of having been in a situation or something, right? That you're like, well, yeah, of course, like you make the mistake once, and you're not going to do it again. And I think in this situation, for me, it's about trying to remember that like your life should have some balance to it, and that it's not just, we go through striving periods, and and that you should be trying to strike some balance. I think obviously I couldn't control whether this happening to me, but I think the thing that I do think about is that I'm like, I waited like 2 weeks before like doing anything about it, to like deny that I had to alter my course. So it's like, I think just like checking in with yourself, remembering that self-care is important.
Yeah, no, I think that is something that plagues a lot of people early in their career, especially if you're striving and you're trying to do well and you want to be successful. And I think for you also, you also stepped up and you put up your hand and said, hey, I want that job.
Totally.
So you also knew you were staking your reputation on doing a really great job.
Right. That like I started with like a promote me or I'm going to leave. Then it's like, okay, well, if you get the job, you better do it, right?
Yeah. So I think it also just sounds like that also really motivated you, which then sometimes also it's kind of hard to your point of, thinking really high, it's hard then when you're really trying to prove yourself to always take time back to think about, okay, like checking in with yourself and and how your body is and what's happening and what's going on, and making time to go to the doctor, which is something that
it's hard.
It's hard, and especially I remember throughout my career, if you were kind of out of not in the office, it was a little bit looked down upon.
Yeah.
So there is kind of that weird cultural baggage which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you should be able to go and,
I try to remember that, like, if I don't go to the doctor, what am I going to say? Like, oh yeah, like, I had to have my teeth pulled because I wound up getting, gum disease or something, because like, I couldn't go to the dentist because like
there wasn't enough time.
Client
so
status
busy, right?
On that week was on, at the same time, so I couldn't reschedule. It's like, those are the kinds of things I feel like, especially in agencies and other like client service
businesses,
professions, where we like are like, oh, all of my needs, I'll deal with those later.
Right, because everything is focused on the client and being responsive and doing a great job, and in your case also just kind of proving that you were worth that promotion.
Totally.
So what happened with the hotel? Because that's, I'm sitting here like, okay, so there were two options. Both of them sound horrible. And, so what happened with the hotel?
Thankfully, we either started, as the word got out,
bringing your own sheets and blankets and like
your own like giant Ziploc bag to sleep in. People either started doing way more just like day trips, like travel with a buddy. Someone will drive there, someone will drive back. Thankfully, for me personally, a friend of mine wound up moving to the area, so I was able to.
Oh, stay there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I worked on a client that was similarly in a small town with not a great hotel. And the water was always rusty. And so unless we really had to, we would much rather, get up at 4 a.m, drive, get home at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, than spend the night in that hotel.
Yeah. And for a profession that always gets such a, like, I think that the outside world looks at it as like the glamorous world of advertising, right?
Of course. Staying at the Four Seasons,
right, you're in a Four
Shutters in
Seasons
Santa Monica.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
I'm on a boat in Bali, right?
Yeah,
and it's like
but the reality is, because have you ever made it to the Four Seasons in Tokyo?
No.
Yeah.
No, never
still,
been to
you still
Tokyo.
Could.
Someday, maybe.
Could.
I don't know. I feel like the industry's changing. I'd get to Tokyo, but we'd have to stay in an Airbnb or something.
Dan Richardson, thank you very much for being on Not Suitable for Work.
Thank you so much. This was great.
I want to thank Dan for sharing a rather delicate and highly personal story. His situation underscores how we can all get caught up in our own self-importance and ambition, so much so that we forget to take care of ourselves. We convince ourselves that we can't make time for a doctor's appointment. There's too much work to be done. I can't be out of the office. Or my favorite, I don't want to have to deal with what the doctor may tell me. And in Dan's case, I'm just hallucinating. It's not real. This is similar to how we respond when the engine light in our car is screaming red. We hope it's a fluke because going to the dealer or repair shop is a pain in the ass. The problem is that it never goes away on its own, and it will only get worse. So pay attention to your engine light when it's flashing red. I want to thank you for listening to Not Suitable for Work. If you haven't, take a second to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. If you want more Not Suitable for Work or have a work story to share, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Not Suitable for Work. You can find our podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you find your podcast, including our newest location on the iHeartRadio app. If you have a question you want answered on a future episode, call us at 872-256-0827. I'm Peter C. Diamond. You can follow me on Twitter at Peter C. Diamond. Not Suitable for Work is produced by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Until next time.